Welcome to the Lightforge Podcast, Voyage to the Sunken City, Grinning Goat Arena Card Review, Valuation, whatever you want to call it, stream, podcast, VOD. This is Oddwickton.
This is Merps. Welcome to the review that takes too long, but that's because we actually prepare for it. Now, if you listen to other people who perhaps love the number 9.4, you'll notice that there are severe things lacking in those evaluations, like preparation or facts or reading comprehension, and hopefully you'll find that here. So welcome.
Not guaranteed. Reading comprehension, not guaranteed. We have all read the cards, but only like 3-4 times. And cards are getting complicated now. One thing about this set is that this Voyage of the Sunken Sea set has a lot of interesting arena cards. It's because the game's just getting more complicated. And a lot of these mechanics that in some of the, if you were looking at like 4 years ago, if you had one of these interesting mechanics, it was probably not arena viable at all, and you barely have to think about it. But now, like, everything comes in at a significant enough clip and has such a huge effect on the game that you do have to think about all of this.
All right. Go.
Okay, so the first thing we have to do, and I normally start these off, if you guys don't know, this is the first video of, or podcast of what will be 8 hours of recorded content that if you're watching this recorded, it'll probably be like a little over 6 hours or something, and we're going to go over every card. But we always start with an overview of the upcoming meta, which in the last like 2 years has been very weird because Blizzard has gotten to the point where they just control everything and they don't really tell you what's going on. So we've been making less and less concrete predictions. In theory, that should no longer be the case now because all the offering rates have been standardized, but bugs happen all the time. Like in the previous meta, there was the epic bug, which meant that any predictions you had about the meta, including our predictions, were all wrong when it comes to how fast the meta will be or how many dragons will be in the meta, right? Like that kind of stuff. And so that causes a lot of the ratings to shift based on that. And there's nothing we can do about it. They have fixed the epic bug, and we'll talk about that later. But as Merps brought up before the podcast started, they fixed the epic bug last time too, and then they launched an expansion. The epic bug came back, so yeah, we're never actually safe until we see the patch and it's okay. But let's just start with what is new. What is new is a whole new rotation and a new core set. The core set, they only replaced a few cards, and we'll talk about that after we talk about the rotation. So the rotation is, just imagine all the cards that you normally play with going out. And what is coming back in is, 1, the new set, 2, Alterac, including the mini sets. Everything includes the mini sets. So Alterac has the mini set attached to Onyxia's Lair. So that's in the current meta and will stay in. All those new cards that you probably hate, that's all staying in. Your Knight Captains, that whole thing. Next, Stormwind. United in Stormwind is coming in. We have not had United in Stormwind for a very long time. And it was only in during the United in Stormwind meta itself. So maybe there may not be a lot of familiarity with these cards. But United in Stormwind is coming back, and it is a modern set that has a lot of decently high power sets. This is the set that had Battlegrounds Battlemaster, which they nerfed. And then it has a bunch of cards that were like good, like fine arena cards, but not the biggest difference makers, right? You had things like Traveling Merchant, Nobleman, Enthusiastic Banker, Pandarian Importer, Encumbered Pack Mule. Like, these are good arena cards, but those are like some of the best cards. Stormwind Guard, that's the another big one. So these are, they're not like Knight Captain levels of good. But they will be back in the arena and doing some damage, and you may have forgotten about them. After that, there will be 3 old sets, 2 old real sets and 1 old mini set: the Grand Tournament, Old Gods, and League of Explorers. We're not going to talk about them really because they don't matter. Whenever a set that is that old comes in, these are sets like launched in the first 2 years of Hearthstone's existence. Like, these are the cards there are barely playable now. And it means that you're going to draft not these cards whenever you get the opportunity. And you may think, oh no, I've heard that before. I've been playing that in the arena for the past like 2 months of just taking these 3 mana 3/3s that don't do anything, and it's been an awful experience. Well, these cards are even worse than the cards that are in the current meta. But on the bright side, there's going to be fewer of these cards offered. The current wild rotation that we're coming out of actually only has one modern set, which is Alterac. It has no other modern sets. The most recent set after Alterac that is in there is Descent of Dragons, which fair, Descent of Dragons has power levels that's approximately what modern sets are, but not really. Whereas this upcoming rotation will have 3 modern sets: Stormwind, Alterac, Sunken City. That is a big, big deal. And you're going to see significantly more consistency in your decks because of it. So step number 1 is that your decks are going to be more consistent with more relevant cards. And everything's going to be a little nicer if the Epic bug remains fixed. So that's the first mental adjustment to make. We are going back to what is more like the Alterac meta and less like the Onyxia's Lair meta, even though Onyxia's Lair is still in. Just because there's more relevant sets that are coming in. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2, well, yeah, okay, we'll put this all as number 2. Number 2 is that even though we're going back to the Alterac meta a bit, one of the things that is not going to change is the ridiculous swings that's going to happen. And not exactly the swings as in, oh, this card is so good that it's going to cause a swing. That is around, and we live with it. That's just the modern era, and we've kind of gotten used to it. Like, there were some not terrible metas in United and Stormwind and in early Alterac that involved really heavy swings on both sides. And I think, especially towards the late United and Stormwind era, people really just kind of got okay with that amount of swing and really kind of embraced it and was like, this is just kind of how Hearthstone is going to be, before the dragons came in and upended everything. And we're going back there, which is not necessarily the like a bad thing. But on top of that, there is going to be these discover mechanics that are going to be very hit or miss. And we've seen these before, but it's going to go to another level now. If you guys remember, the best example I could think of is Mech Engineer in United and Stormwind, which is 2 mana, 1/2, discover a mech, reduce its cost by 1. And it is actually banned. They removed it from the game. And they did that because Sneeds was a legendary released at the same time. Oh, did I get the name wrong? What's the name of the card I'm talking about? It's some kind of engineer. Deep Run Engineer. There we go. Okay, well, I mean, it's a mech engineer.
I was like, does he know what he said? I'm like, maybe he'll correct himself.
It's a mech engineer. It hasn't been in the arena because it was banned. Okay, Deep Run Engineer. It got banned because Sneeds, the legendary card, was ridiculously powerful for its era. And when you have Sneeds coming out 1 turn earlier on turn 7, not even on turn 8, it really just won you games in that era. So that card got banned. Now, Deep Run Engineer was never like an S tier card or anything. We didn't rate it an S tier card. We rated it a little too low, but even at its heyday when it got banned, it was not an S tier card. It was not even an A tier card, I don't think. But the wild swings from that card created situations, many situations, very often. It was also a common neutral card, where if you played the Deep Run Engineer, which you should because it was a good card, it was like a B plus kind of card, and so you would draft him, like, even good players would draft him more often than not. And once it's in your deck, you play it, and if you get the Sneeds, it's great, and you win the game. And if you don't get the Sneeds, it's terrible, because the other mechs were all terrible. So that kind of thing, I'm going to call this Jackpot Discovers, where there's basically 1 card, or like 2 cards in your Discover pool, where you win the jackpot. If you get it, you have a 90% chance of winning the game from that point on. And the other cards are kind of eh. So in these jackpot discovers, they had to ban mech. I'm going to keep calling him mech engineer because it's an engineer that discovers mechs. So the mech engineer was the first really bad jackpot discovers. You had a little vague, like Scorpid was kind of like it, but there was usually more than one good spell. But you had the same kind of effect where everybody hated Scorpid when it came out. And by the way, I did some math and I revalued Scorpid based on the system I use now rather than the system I used when Scorpid actually came out. And by my math, it's an S tier card now. So at the time, we said it was an A tier card, but at the time, we may have been wrong on how good Discover spells were. I think that was one of the reasons. And I just tuned the system a little bit more. So now I would consider Scorpid an S tier card, and it's not banned still. But don't worry, Scorpid
spells are also just better. Spells are also just like really insane.
Spells got better as well since Scorpid came out. So that's why the math got tuned a little. Anyway, the jackpot discovers in this meta are going to come from mechs and dragons. So there are colossal cards, which I'm not going to spoil what cards they were, but just know that colossals are giant legendaries that win you the game if you play them. They're S+ tier cards. They're coming in this meta, in this new set, and 2 of them are mechs, and they're in Mage and Paladin. So in addition to Sneeds, which is back, you can discover one of those mechs or Sneeds at a rate of about 35% for Mage and Paladin. So if you get them, it's great. If you don't get them, it's bad. And you can discover mechs in one of 2 ways. You can discover mechs with a epic 2-drop that lets you discover mechs. It's an epic card, you're not going to see it that often. It's a new card. But also with Gorillabot, which is entering the meta as a core card now. And Gorillabot just says if you have a mech in play, and Gorillabot's a 3-mana 3/4 now. They buffed it, so it's actually going to see play. So if you have a mech in play, you play the Gorillabot, and the Gorillabot lets you discover a mech.
Also, just don't underestimate them putting Deep Run back in for some reason.
Oh god, I hope not. They haven't put back anything they banned so far, so I hope that's not going to happen.
Yeah. Like, here's the thing, though. What odds would you give it? Like, 10 to 1?
Yeah, something like that.
That'll happen. It's like a 10% chance, right? Like, are you going to give me better odds than that? I don't think so. So, yeah. I think there's like a 10% chance that Deep Run Engineer makes its way back into the meta.
All right. I'm hoping that won't happen. Mostly because it takes extra work to put Deep Run Engineer back in the meta. All the stuff that they've taken out of the meta before, when the sets come back, they've stayed gone. Even if they stop being problematic. So, yeah, I think 10 to 1 odds are about right. But that's still only 10% chance. We're going to go with the 90% chance here. The Blizzard does not put Deep Run Engineer back. But anyway, Gorillabot's going to be a real problem. Because Gorillabot is going to have this Discover issue of Mage and Paladin, and those Colossal cards are like win game cards. Like, they trigger at like 7 or 8 mana, you play them, you just win the game. There's nothing your opponents can do. They're like literally S+ tier level, they're Nexia level cards. And some of the other ones you can discover too, but the rates are a little lower. So if your discover rate, like one of the problems with Deep Run Engineer was that your discover rate of Sneeds was really, really high. If your discover rate is at like 5 or 10%, yeah, it's not good for the meta, but then it really becomes a jackpot, right? Like, and that's fine because it doesn't happen as frequently. It's when the jackpot discovers really become a problem when you win the jackpot like a third of the time. Even for something like, I'm now thinking of the Alterac Shaman card that can get you Lieutenant. On turn 6, Glaciate. Like, Glaciate has, what was it, like a 1/4 chance of being able to get Abominable Lieutenant? That's kind of okay. Like, it's not good. I think it's a little too high, but that's 25% chance. So if you're at like 10% chance, then I think that card stops being problematic, and then you just kind of accept it if your opponent does hit the jackpot. And you just kind of like cross your fingers and go, oh, don't hit the jackpot. It's when the percentages are like 30%, 35%, 25% that it really becomes a problem. And so mechs definitely get there for mages and paladins, which is going to make things bad. But let's not even talk about mechs. Let's talk about dragons, which we all know and love right now. They just made the Paladin Explorer, the 3 mana 2/3 lifesteal. They buffed it to be a 3 mana 3/3 lifesteal, the Discover a Dragon, and they made it into core. So Paladin, on top of discovering mechs, can also just freely discover dragons by playing a common card. And everybody can use that 2 mana new card, the 2-drop, to discover a dragon if they have a dragon on the board. And dragon discovers are 40% to get either Onyxia, Deathwing, or Ysera. All of these are almost certain game enders for victory. Less so Deathwing, but definitely Onyxia and Ysera, and Deathwing will swing the game real hard too. So we're getting into this discover problem again, even though the big problem card like Scorpid, for example, isn't really back. And it remains to be seen how bad of an issue this is, or have we just gotten so swingy that these jackpot cards are not as terrible for the meta as they were a few metas ago. But I think it's gonna still be a noticeable trend that's gonna annoy good players. Okay, so that's point number 2. Point number 3, I just want to mention it, is that Stormwind, United and Stormwind had a bunch of taunts, and they're all coming back. So Lion's Guard, Morag Forge Fiend, Stockades Guard, Stormwind Guard, Encumbered Pack Mule, those are all a lot of taunt stats, and they're all coming back. So the meta is going to slow down a bit. And also Tar Creeper and Primordial Drake are rotating in to the core set without removing any neutral taunts. So there's going to be a kind of, I mean, Primordial Drake's epic, right? And they fixed the epic bug. But it's going to be a bit more taunty than what you had been seeing up to this point. Just something to note. Finally, the last point is that I just looked over the core set and the refresh. It didn't really do much. I was really expecting a much bigger change, but they pretty much held consistent, which I guess makes sense. They probably didn't think there was anything too, in need of changing for the core set. There's not that much to really discuss here. We already talked about Bronze Explorer, which Paladins are getting to keep, basically, even as the meta rotates for Arena. And Warlocks keep Abyssal Enforcer. These are all insanely good cards, as you know. So that makes a big difference. On the other hand, some other things to look out for is Mage is getting Pyroblast rotated back in. Pyroblast was never a great card, but it does change the way you think about the game sometimes. And Shaman's getting Bloodlust back in. Again, also, like, Bloodlust used to be actually a good card. Nowadays, there's just easier ways to end the game than a card that does nothing if you don't have the board. But it's still something to kind of keep an eye out. So that's my overview of the meta that we are going to come into. I think more so than any other meta we've had in the past year and a half maybe, the new cards are going to be the most impactful thing in this meta, rather than the change in the meta itself with the rotation, which is a weird thing to say. But these new cards are really interesting, and a lot of them are really good. And some of them are broken, but there's also a lot just in the really good and totally okay in the arena and interesting category. So it's this is going to be a meta that I think will be a lot driven by the actual new cards, which is exciting to see. And we're just coming out of such a terrible meta that I am almost certain that this meta will not be worse. Almost certain. They can always bring the epic bug back. They can always do crazy things, and we do know
a lot of people are saying that the current meta really sucks. So
yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying.
I don't know if they're very happy to hear that statement.
Well, I'm saying it's not going to be worse. It'll probably be better. I don't know how much better, but it could have always gotten worse, right? That was always a possibility. So we'll see what happens in the meta, but expect it to be generally mid-ranged. if you're in the meta in this past week after they got rid of the epic bug, you'll see that it's actually very fast, and the speed's going to slow back down with these new sets rotating in, with the taunts, and just kind of with the mana cost of a lot of the cards. So yeah, it's gonna be a mid range meta, which is good. There's gonna be a bit more RNG than I think what most people would like, even compared to the fall metas, but less swings and just unbeatable stuff that we currently have. Because dragons, right? Dragons are always the worst, and we're getting out of dragons for the most part.
All right, cool.
Cool. So, anything you want to preview before we really get to it and go down get to the actual card reviews?
No, you want to do the explanation of our scoring system for the next one?
Let's just do the scoring system now here. We have this. This hasn't been that long, mostly because, like I said, this is a weird meta in which the giant rotation, in which all the cards are rotating out almost, except for Alteric, and there's a new core set, isn't actually that impactful. So if you were listening to us for the past month, we were like, "Oh, everything's going to change. It's going to be super whatever." Well, everything did change, but it kind of doesn't matter as much as we thought it would. At least that's what I'm predicting now. Anyway, from here on out, we're going to be talking about the tier list, and we're actually going to show you the new card. So we're going to show you the new card. We're going to discuss how to use it. We're going to talk about how good it is. And we're going to go from the top down for the neutral cards first. So the best neutral cards, there's 5 of them. You can try to guess which ones if you're listening to this or watching this without knowing. And then afterwards, we're going to talk about all the other good ones, which are B tier. So the first top 5 are A and S tier cards. Then is our B tier cards. Then is our C tier cards. And then is our bad cards, which are D and F tiers. So what the tiers generally mean is that S tier cards are broken. They exist usually with legendaries or like the top of class cards, but they're universally hated. This is stuff like Caverns. This is stuff like Ysera. Like S tier cards are just bad. They shouldn't be in the game and arena. A tier cards are too good to be neutral commons or neutral rares. So A tier card, a good example of an A tier card. Well, I actually have to find an example of an A tier card. What's one of the A tier cards from before? Like, okay,
class or neutral?
Neutral. So Spammy, for example, I think that's a good example of an A tier card. Spammy, which we all know now, and with the epic bug, you saw a lot of Spammies. That is an A tier card. It's not even an A plus tier card; it's just a regular A tier card. It's terrible for the meta, right? But it's an epic card, and as an epic card, you're kind of like, like it's not the worst thing in the world. Obviously, we don't like it, but it's kind of fine. But you cannot have Spammy be a common card. And you saw what happened when Spammy was effectively a common card. Like, the meta gets super freaking, like, weird and bad. So, A-tier cards are kind of everywhere in class cards. A lot of class cards are A-tier cards. But that's good, because you want class cards to be able to do this kind of stuff. You don't want common neutrals and rare neutrals to be doing this. So, some A-tier cards in the past... Yeah, we'll just use Spammy as an example. Below A tier cards are our B tier cards. B tier cards are the cards that you normally think of as good, like in your deck, as far as neutrals go. Your average card these days is probably like a C plus tier or maybe a low B tier card. In this upcoming meta, in the current meta, your average card is probably a C tier. But the card quality is going up, right? On average, we talked about that. So a B plus tier card is something like Knight Captain. That's our standard O2 for a B plus. This is the absolute max that a common neutral card can be without starting to break the game. And B tier cards go down quite a bit to other things. Like some things, like a Peon, for example, is a B tier card. I'm looking at our ratings from before. Some of just to find some of the cards that you can think of when you think of a B tier card, like Encumbered Pack Mule. That's a B tier card. They're good cards.
We have Corporal at B.
There we
I
go.
think that's
Corporal's
a
a beast.
decent
That's a great
example.
card. Mm-hmm.
Because how many times is it just a 2/3 that has like it's got taunt, right? It's definitely got taunt. People definitely want to get rid of it. You can sometimes get Divine Shield, and you can sometimes get the super value out of it. But let's not misremember how many times it gets the super value Divine Shields. It's
Yep.
not that common. So that's what I think that's a good example of a B tier card. Either a card that consistently gets a little bit of value, or sometimes just completely pops off.
Yep. And then C tier cards, the very bottom of C tier and the very top of D plus tier is Yeti. So C tier cards are everything that is normal. We consider that the normal tier. They're cards that are better than a Yeti, but not like a lot better than a Yeti. So Corporal is a lot better than a Yeti. Like a Yeti with a taunt, for example, may not be that much better than a Yeti. That'll be a B tier card, but it's still better than a Yeti. So that's your C tier. D tier are your worse than a Yeti cards. Like Croc would be here. Some other they're not going to kill your deck if you put a couple of these in, but you're going to feel it. They're not doing anything special. And F tier cards are the terrible cards. You do not want to play these cards. F tier cards generally do either nothing or very little. We have a wide range for it. So something like an Elwyn Boar is an F tier card. Like it's a 1-mana 1/1. You don't want that. Even though it's not a totally useless card, right? Like it will do something in your deck. It's not unplayable. It's not a cannot attack card or anything. But yeah, those are all F tier. So that's our rating system. We break it down into the main category, like a B, A, C, D, or whatever, and then we also give pluses to around 25% of the cards in that category to identify the ones that are kind of on the border. Keep that in mind as we value the cards later. I think this is a better way to think about the cards than specific numbers. Like if you're not doing an algorithm and crunching down specific numbers, you really just want to know like roughly what tier the card is in, and then your deck, you'll just make decisions based on your deck. So for like advanced players, like this is our predictions of how good these cards are. And in the upcoming 6 hours of podcast, we will talk about each and every one of these cards coming up, and we will tell you how to play them, what to watch out for, and why we think that they are that good or bad. I don't think there's that many surprises, but it gets pretty in depth because these are some interesting cards that are coming up in Sunken City.
Yep. All right. That's all I have to say.
That's all I have to say. All right. Okay.
All right.
Let's. I'm going to give a shout out here as we are closing out our first video. Shout out to our Patreons at patreon.com/grinninggoat. Our wonderful Patreons supporting us, keeping the lights on, making all this possible, as well as our subs on Twitch. The top Patreons for the month: RV Night Train, Eric L, Yin, Reg, Dan F, and Karova. Also a shout out to Brand New and 4P for supporting us. They're our spouses, and we are terrible people leading up to every one of these giant streams. Who else? I just kind of want to dump all the shout outs here, and then we'll give more shout outs after every episode or every part of this card review. Shout out to our mods who are in our chat right now, and all of our viewers who are watching. Shout out to David Attenborough Says, who is going to upload these to YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, that's all his work. And to Soren, who is not doing this, but he does our 12-win videos that you see come up. That's kind of the team right now. I don't know if I'm forgetting someone.
If you're forgetting someone, we'll mention it later, but it's probably That's fine.
Okay.
Like, if you have to drag on for this long, we can think of it some other time.
All right.
Goodbye.
All right. See you guys in the next episode when we talk about the number 1 card of the upcoming meta in Sunken City. Until then, this is Adukta.
This is Merps. Goodbye.